Thanks for listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. 1 hour of tips from experts and real stories from people just like you. For those thinking about what lies ahead, for those going through the job search, and those who have paved the way to their next career after the military. These professionals are dedicated to helping you move forward successfully to the next phase of your career after the military. Welcome to Exchange.
And we are here with our first segment of the show. Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Cross. I am your host. We are with the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. Our first segment of every hour starts with somebody who is literally in the soup. They are actively transitioning out of the military, looking into the job force. They're interviewing, they're writing resumes, they are going through the thick of it, flying by instruments. And I found somebody from the Air Force that truly knows what that means. I have Captain Brittney Reeves. Hi, Brittney. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really glad to see you today. We were talking a little bit before I hit the record button on your process. And I feel these stories are so valuable. So why don't you share with our listeners what you're going through and what your timeline is for separation or leaving the military?
I started thinking about leaving, I think well before a year out. And I still have about like 10 months left before I separate. So I kind of had some time to start thinking about my process. I started talking to a lot of people that had already gone through separation, kind of see like what were the milestones, what were the points, what are some things that they wanted to check off. I'm very much a planner. So the earlier I can start to get things done, the better I feel. But obviously, separation is something that I don't think, you know, as much as you plan for it too, it's always going to be a little bit scary. But since I'm so far out, I've already started doing, your traditional things like going to TAP, which they had some great information, but that's just like the tip of the iceberg of what's out there. Right now, I, finished my resume. That was like one of the big things I wanted to work on and finish. And now I'm trying to do a skill bridge. So kind of researching different companies, trying to get a feel for what I want to do. And we were kind of talking about that a little bit before now
Mm-hmm.
is one of my biggest things and my biggest challenges is trying to figure out what exactly I want to do when I separate. So I'm looking for jobs,
Right.
but as I'm looking for jobs, I'm like, do I want to keep on doing what I'm doing in the military? Do I want to stay in the government sector, which part of me kind of does because it's familiar and I did enjoy my time in the military? Or do I want to do a break and try something in the civilian sector outside of the government? So that's kind of my biggest challenge right now. And then I was just talking to a colonel who he was thinking about separating and now he's stayed in for a few years and is going to retire. And he recommended a book to me where it was, I think, What Color is My Parachute was one. Because he
Yes.
was like, yeah, he was
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm going through the same exact thing where I'm trying to figure out, I've done all these different things and I'm capable, but he's like, I don't know what I actually enjoy doing. So he gave me some tips too, on kind of how
Good.
to start doing some self-reflection and sifting through and kind of almost finding yourself. But yeah, that's kind of my biggest thing is leaning on people who have gone through the process, are preparing for the process, kind of having that camaraderie and know that you're not going through it alone. I was actually interviewing for Skill Bridge at a company, and one of the guys I was interviewing with, had served 24 years in the Air Force and retired. And it was kind of nice talking to him because it was a civilian company, but it was a familiar face because he was military. And he let me know too. He's like, I know it's scary, and he's like, it's gonna be scary, but he's like, once you get through it, like you'll know it's the right decision. But he's like, it's terrifying. He's like, it's gonna be terrifying along the way. So
What do you think is the most frightening part? And you say terrifying, so I'm using your
yeah,
words. What's the most terrifying part? Is it the unknown?
I think so. Yeah. So still trying to figure myself out. Like I said before, I almost feel so I graduated college before I enlisted. So I still sometimes feel like, oh, I'm back, where I graduated college trying to figure out what to do with my life, like back at square one. And then I think another terrifying part is, you know, trying to be sure of yourself. I think in the military, kind of where you stand, your position. It's just kind of a different lifestyle. And then you have to start from scratch and put yourself out there again. So it's like you may have a pretty impressive career in the military, but then trying to translate that into like the civilian world or another job, I think fear of rejection is a big thing for
Yeah.
me right now, just because you don't really so much have to apply. Like there's some jobs in the military you have to apply and put a package in for, but for the most part, you get your assignment, you go, and you're like, okay, like this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to do the best I can. But yeah, knowing that you basically have to apply and try to sell yourself to get a job, that kind of scares me a little bit.
So did you have a civilian career before you went from college to military? Is that it? Did you work at all, even at like a fast food or anything?
Yes,
Did you have any type of civilian experience? Okay.
I worked through college, and then once I graduated college. So my family, I'm a first generation like college graduate. Nobody previous, had graduated. So when I went to college, there wasn't a lot of, mentorship on kind of like, oh, here's what you should major in, like kind of get a feel for what you want to do. So when I went to college, it was kind of, I had no plans for the future. I had no career, like ideas. So I went and I ended up majoring. I was initially going for teaching, and then I switched. And everybody at that point was like, well, just do what you love. And I was like, I really loved history. So I majored in history, and I was really naive and was like, well, with my history degree, I can go to Washington, D.C., and I can try to get a job at the Smithsonian working as a curator, not realizing that you need a lot more education and a lot more experience to get a job like that. So when I finally graduated, I did do job hunting, and it was tough because I had no experience. I didn't do any internships. So, you're told at that point, I had this naive assumption that, oh, I have a degree, it'll be easy to find a job, and I couldn't. So yeah, I ended up I worked at J.C. Penney's
Okay.
on the sales floor, and I actually had to work two jobs at the same time. So I worked there, and then I also worked at Sam's Club part-time and kind of combined the two, like working full-time between the two jobs. But that's kind of
Hmm.
the breadth of my civilian experience. It was kind of odd jobs like that before I enlisted.
So coming out of the military as an officer, you might not want to go back into those retail or
No.
entry level positions. It
Yeah.
feels like you think that you're going to have to start at the bottom.
Hmm.
Am I right? Is that kind of what's playing into your I'm not feeling so secure about this? Is that your thought?
Sometimes, especially if I do look to kind of transition careers and do something a little bit different, I am a little bit
Hmm.
worried that, oh yeah, you might have to, because I have heard stories of people where they're like, oh yeah, you're making a certain amount of money doing something in the military, and then once you get out,
Yeah.
you have to kind of cage your expectations and know that you may not necessarily be, at that level in the civilian side. You might have to start a little bit lower and then work your way up again. So that is a little frightening, just because, I kind of worked my way up in the military, and now having to go out there and just kind of start fresh again.
Brittany, what is your MOS?
Yeah, so I am a 14N, so I'm an intelligence officer.
I just want to let you know, and for those of you listening, there are a lot of companies that are taking your MOS and translating them to their jobs. The
Okay.
big companies, I know one of the big telecommunications companies, I won't say the name, has it. And just look up MOS Translator. You can find them for free. A lot of the veteran service organizations and veteran nonprofits or
Hmm.
veteran serving nonprofits have them. So, with just let's spitball, with an intelligence degree, you have exceptional data science skills or data and analytics skills. That's
Yeah.
very valuable in the workforce. You're using data and don't realizing it. So I haven't looked at your resume. So I want you to know that data science, data analyst, your communication skills will be on par. I don't know if you've done technical intelligence or human intelligence, but
Yeah.
as a former competitive intelligence person, I went into recruiting because the sourcing team needed someone to teach ethics. When I learned what recruiting did, I thought that was fun, and I've been there for 20 years. So, you will kind of navigate through as you lean into your interest. I was motivated by salary. So I would have stayed a researcher forever had it paid as much as recruiting. Recruiting's fun for me because I get to do both. I get to interview people, which is something I've missed, and now as an ambassador or a military to civilian career voice and podcast host and book writer. I'm an author now, all these things, but I get to take a different purview, right? And I had to create those experiences. It wasn't like I woke up one morning and said, I'm going to be a podcaster. No, I had to gain all of the experience in order to get to that next level or that next ladder rung. And I think you're doing that too. Stepping back to step forward, though, is one of the common themes that I hear people say, leaving at any level, if they've been 4 years or 31 years. It is, I'm so afraid that I'm losing the momentum that I've built in the military. As a captain, you walk in a room, people understand your rank just because of your uniform. So it's sort of this silent code of who you are and how hard you've worked to get there. And you don't have that in the corporate world. Tell me about SkillBridge. So you're looking at SkillBridge programs. You obviously identified a few. You don't have to say the companies' names that might be interviewing you, but the industries. What industries have been reaching out to you through the SkillBridge program, or what industries are you looking at to accomplish that through SkillBridge?
So I work with acquisitions right now, doing intel support to acquisitions. So I've been looking a lot at project management, but I know that's something that's very different in the civilian side. So some of the companies I've been looking at have project management, like cohorts and training programs. So I've looked at a few of those and applied and spoke with a few of the recruiters for that. And then most recently, the one that I interviewed with, they're a smaller company, but they deal more with like virtual reality training. And so I saw them and I'm like, it just sounded really interesting the more I did research into it. So that's kind of my offshoot one where I'm like, let me apply and kind of see what this is all about. So that's kind of the one I was pretty excited about. Yeah. So
are you having the conversation with the company, or is it through the SkillBridge program?
So it's actually with the company. So what I did was I went through the SkillBridge website and was kind of narrowing down. So I'm trying to stay local. So I'm looking at companies in Ohio, which kind of narrows it down a little bit, and then remote job opportunities too. And then, a lot of the companies I'll find. And then they have a website where you can find their SkillBridge page and then apply. But some of them are a little bit hidden. So I've actually been, LinkedIn's very helpful because you can find recruiters for different companies and then kind of reach out to them. And that's what I've done with a couple too, just reach out to them and ask.
You're getting them on board. You're doing work for the SkillBridge program. I have a colleague here in Hawaii who did the same thing. She created her job through the SkillBridge experience, and she sort of helped the company connect the dots. And they didn't create the job for her, but they had a job like it, similar on the U.S. mainland, and put it here in Hawaii. And it's been a wonderful match. I mean, companies have tried to steal her, and she won't go. She just won't go because she loves her job. So I think that's really smart of you to go with your interests and you're combining your skills, but looking at something that really is exciting to you. Having a location as an anchor, let's talk about anchors. So you're anchored in the location because you've made a decision to stay in that state. You're also transitioning from active duty to military spouse, correct?
Correct.
So, and I don't know if your significant other will have the opportunity to stay, but this means that you have to stay flexible and fungible. And how do you do that in conversations? Do you bring it up with the recruiters? I'm curious how you're handling this.
There was one recruiter where I did bring it up because they sought me out and they did say that, to be successful, you kind of have to open up your horizons to different locations. And with him, I was pretty honest. I was like, no, I'm pretty I'm pretty set to stay in this location, which does narrow your opportunities a little bit.
Mhm.
But that was the one where I brought it up because he brought up the topic. Usually I don't.
Right. It can be a limiting factor, right?
Yes,
You
yes,
don't want to play into people's biases. Yeah, even though they have military recruiting teams, doesn't mean that they fully, I mean, recruiters are trying to fill their jobs.
yep,
Recruiters are trying to fill their jobs. And if they're talking to you, you're 10 months out, that's a long time to have a conversation. And if a
yes,
company has those type of what we call evergreen jobs that'll be open when you are available, then don't bypass those companies. If you see
yeah,
during your research on the job boards that these jobs are populating and staying, then definitely you can apply. I don't recommend anybody apply before 90 days before their availability date simply
yeah,
because of the hiring timeline. But
yep.
if you get in too early, which is why I created a Facebook picture frame generator and it'll
Oh
be on
yeah,
my website. Yeah, and it's taking off like wildfire because, hey, even the recruiters are like, gosh, I see the open to work and I'm so excited, but they're like a year and a half out. I can't hire them.
yeah,
I mean, and and please understand, people, if I'm saying this from the bottom of my very small recruiter heart, recruiters are very busy, and with they have 40, 50, 60 job openings, they're trying to fill them. That's their job. And having
yeah,
conversations with 1, 5, 10, 100 people who are not available, it's not that it's a waste of time because it's a conversation. And your time is valuable and their time is valuable. But I
mhm,
want you, as the applicants and the candidates coming into these companies, to be prepared and to
yeah,
know what type of conversation you have. So instead of maybe putting your energy into that recruiter, you find somebody who is a veteran at that organization who maybe wants to be, have a few conversations with you about their experience so that you
mhm,
have a touchstone to the company, but you're not necessarily taking up the recruiter's time because you're too early in the
yeah,
conversation. So, thank you for letting me explore that. It sounds like you really have figured out a lot. You've done a lot of planning, and
yeah.
I want to ask you questions. You mentioned this before. You said big dreams. You
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to maybe work for Smithsonian. Do you still
yep.
have a desire to work for the Smithsonian?
It would be really neat, but I don't. I would not want to live in DC. I love Washington DC, but yeah,
Okay. Well, don't give up those dreams. Don't
no,
give up those
yeah.
dreams. They have partner museums all over the country, all over the
Okay, that
world,
is true.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't give up the dream of the Smithsonian. What a great institution.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite places, too. So I just want to say we're kind of at time, but I would love to hear more of your thoughts and more of your experiences as it might help people who are transitioning. So I'm going to ask you a military questions.
Yeah.
What's your last alibi? Any last alibis?
Yeah, so I'll say one thing because it kind of got my mind thinking when you were talking about timing and reaching out to recruiters because that is one of the main things I've been struggling with is I like to be prepared, but and I started networking and doing all that, but that's something I've really struggled with where trying to find that sweet spot where it's like you don't want to be too early, but then you don't want to be too late. And I ran into that with Skillbridge too because I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm starting early. I'm, getting ahead of the game on Skillbridge." And then one of my interviews, they're like, "So when are you available for Skillbridge?" I'm like, "May or June." And they're like, "Oh, like that's really far out." And I was like, "Yeah, I just wanted to get a head start to try to get in there because I didn't want to miss an opportunity." But like what you said is a great point because yeah, then they're there and they're like, "Oh man, like that's still a ways out. Like we still got some time." But
Hopefully, that company will have some cohorts for you available and they can just keep you on that warm list.
yeah,
Hopefully.
that's what I hope. But yeah, that's the timing. That's been a struggle for me too. Just not too early, not too late. So the 90 day, I like the 90 days rule of thumb.
Yeah. 90. I mean, you have 180 days for let's say the last part of your military. And that's when I think the military expects you to really start putting your nose to the grindstone to leave. And
Yep.
that's when you're taking taps, and as an officer you can take them twice.
Hmm.
So, there's a lot of resources out there.
Yeah.
And if you're living in or near a base that has a military family support center, those are the friends you want to make listeners, those are the folks that you can walk in any time of the day and maybe talk to an employment specialist. They are the most underutilized resource in the military. And they do more than teach TAP classes. They
Yeah.
do more than, help you with your paperwork. They're experts at writing resumes. They're wonderful career counselors. These folks are underutilized. Now, they feel that they're probably overworked because they are doing so much. But, you walk in, that's their job to serve. And these are the people I work with all the time. In fact, I put them in the acknowledgments of my book because they've been such a great resource, even for me on the business side. Hey, you want to teach this class? Hey, you want to create this? Hey, you want to come and network during the lunch and talk about your company? It's like they were bending over backwards for me any place I worked to try and get exposure to their people so they could make better choices. So military, family support center, the employment specialists, they may have different names at different bases, but they all have them. And even if you aren't near a base, you can call them and get them on the phone. Do utilize those resources. Thanks for letting me pitch that. All right. Well, Brittney, thank you so much. I'm going to be watching you not only through LinkedIn, but would love to have you on the show after you hit your first year mark and see how your career progression has gone. It'll be nice to see you outside of your car and not
I know.
in uniform. But I appreciate you sitting in your car. And given the sensitive information that you do, I know you could not work in a skiff and talk to me. So thank you for coming out of your secured environment and being available to our listeners today. Thank you to the listener for being with us and also for just being on this journey as you learn all the tips and tricks from people who are going through the soup, those who've been out 1 to 4 years, and those who've been out at least 5. Our next segment is an expert. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the show. I'm Cheryl Cross, your host, and every episode brings us one expert, 3 veterans and 1 expert. And I'm very proud to bring you someone who I just met, and I said immediately, I want you to be on the podcast. What you're doing to give back to the military to civilian career transitioning or just the veteran community in general is amazing. I'd like to introduce you to the CEO of not 1 but 2 companies, but I know him through the Outlier Project. Please welcome Scott McGregor. Hi, Scott. How are you today?
Cheryl, thank you for having me on. I'm absolutely beyond honored.
Well, thank you, sir. I have learned so much, and these recordings are timeless, but I'll tell you at the point of this recording, I have just entered into, and this is a membership organization, but the people that I have met, and several of them are going to be recorded on the show, have just been phenomenal. Even if they don't serve the veteran community, I'm learning from each and every one of them. So why don't you tell us what Outlier is, maybe why you created it, and what you hope people benefit from?
So the Outlier Project really grew out of my desire to give people access to amazing people because I'm a big believer that if you surround yourself with amazing people, it gives you your best shot at living an extraordinary life. So we have a saying that anybody can be ordinary, but we all have the power to choose to be extraordinary. And I think one of the better ways to do that is to surround yourself with amazing people, which I've tried to do my entire life. And because of that access, I wanted to give a broader audience access to some of the people that have played a pivotal role in my life. Some of them are Navy SEALs or Green Berets or of a military background. Some of them have sports backgrounds. Some of them are very successful business people. But that's one of the things that we do through the Outlier Project. We do about 200 virtual live interactive events a year. And then we do 10 in-person meetups all around the country. And it's just a ton of fun. It's a great way to get everybody together and help people live their version of an extraordinary life.
You know, you're the CEO of another for-profit company, and that is in the talent and human capital spaces. You and I resonate on that. Our first conversation was, We always talk about human capital, but nobody knows what that means. So let me boil this back to you all listening. If you're in the human capital space, you deal with people and how people are moved through companies, how they're attracted, retained, developed, all of it. It's the full life cycle. But what this is interesting to me is this man knows some really cool people. So he created a membership club to meet them. It's like, yeah, I have this really cool friend you have to meet. And for connectors like me and like Scott, we are dying to get you to know. That's one of the reasons I created this podcast. I wanted to create a platform for voices. The people that I was talking to, those everyday folks, had incredible stories that people could learn from. Now, in my book, I talk a lot about networking and civilian mission, the 3-year guide for military professionals planning civilian careers. It is just a chapter. But Scott, tell me about the power of networking. And let's just say, I'm going to throw you a scenario. Let's just say somebody's kind of introverted.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell them to do?
So believe it or not, I'm probably more of an introvert than I am an extrovert. I'm considered kind of an ambivert, but I'm not a really extroverted person. But I grew up poor in an affluent town, and I was surrounded by a lot of people that had accomplished a lot of amazing things. And I developed through sports and friendships through their kids, developed relationships with a lot of adults that had accomplished great things. And I realized at a very early age that surrounding myself with those people and really understanding how they accomplished whatever it was that they did was interesting to me. I'm naturally very curious. So networking to me, like networking sometimes has a negative connotation. It's a thought of walking into a room of strangers and passing out your business card and pitching them on whatever you do. I think of it as just building relationships. I love building relationships, and I love getting to know new friends like yourself, because every person is so interesting. We're all like snowflakes. Everybody is different. And everyone brings this new interesting dynamic. So when we add a new member to the Outlier Project, we now have about 734 countries. It just adds another layer and another layer. And it's just very exciting, I think, to meet people that have very diverse backgrounds. It's one of the most important things you can do from a professional standpoint. And I think for people transitioning out of the military, it's unbelievably important for them. And sometimes a mistake that can be made is that they try to go too narrow. So they only will focus on people that are, let's say, they want to work for, as opposed to broadening it. Like, I believe that, variety is the spice of life. And I like to have friends in all different domains, not just kind of in the lane that happens to pertain to my business. It all does come back and benefit you from a business perspective, but I think it leads to a richer life.
You're absolutely right. And, broadening your perspective and networking, you're really coming at things from your passions. Let's say you're joining a club because you love hockey, and other hockey people are going to make a connection to you. So when you do have that transactional ask, so transactional versus relationship networking, they're very different. You're building a relationship so you can eventually go to that person with an ask. Now, that's not always the intent. There's going to be hundreds of people that you gain in your network that you will never ask for one thing, but it's good to know that they're there. I grew up with a saying, be one favor in. Always have one favor in. You are there to serve. I come from a Christian family that was raised in the Texas, Oklahoma area, and you're always helping others.
Yep.
Do more, be better, give back. That was our family motto. And that was handed down to me from my dad. So if you have $5 and someone has none, you give them $2.50. No questions asked. And you don't brag about it. And you certainly don't talk about it on your podcast. But back to you, you remind me of somebody that is so excited to meet new people. And when you do, you probably create projects. I'm looking at your books behind you. And I know your sons are in service in the military. So I want to open the conversation to what led you to support the military. Was it just your sons? Was it the people you were meeting? What was the spark?
I think I probably would have joined the military myself if I didn't have such a strong desire to get a job and start making money and get myself in a good position. Um, I've always admired everybody in the military. Certainly, the fact that both of my boys served. So my oldest was a Marine and my youngest was 82nd Airborne. Um, the military's always had a soft spot in my heart. Some of my best friends have military backgrounds. I've got a buddy, Todd Seneff, who was a 30-year Navy SEAL commander, and Jason Redman, a longtime Navy SEAL, and just Jason Van Camp, who's on the board of the Outlier Project, who's West Point grad, Green Beret, and runs a phenomenal organization called Warrior Rising. And my fifth book that's coming out this year, 100% of the proceeds are going to Warrior Rising. But my third book was Standing O Salute, which was all military. So everybody in that book was from the military. And 100% of the proceeds for that book went to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. So I definitely have a huge soft spot for our military, because I realize that everything that I'm able to do every day, kind of without even really thinking about it, is only possible because of the sacrifices that so many men and women make on my behalf.
I'm going to cry. Thank you for sharing that. Your books, how many do you have? Are you self-published? Do you have a publisher? What's the process for folks who are listening to get your book? Do they go on Amazon?
Yeah, they can go on Amazon. So it's called the Standing O series. So the first book that I wrote is called Standing O. The second book was Standing O Encore, then Standing O Salute, and then Standing O Tribute. Standing O Honor is the one that's going to be coming out. They're all available on Amazon, but they're anthologies. So when I started my business 9 years ago, something new, giving back was very, very important to me. But I knew I was going to bootstrap the business. So I had a big problem. I was going to pour all the money that I was making back into the business. So I was really going to have a hard time writing big checks to these organizations that I cared about. So I thought, well, my asset is definitely not my big bank account. What is my asset? And my asset was that over the last, 20 some odd years, I've built relationships with amazing people. So I asked 52 friends to write chapters of gratitude for a life lesson learned. I put them in that book. I had Coach Dick Vermeil, who won a Super Bowl with the Rams and is now in the Hall of Fame. He wrote the foreword. And Tiki Barber, who is an all-time great running back for the New York Giants, wrote the cover quote. And the book did well, not because of me, but because 52 really prominent people wrote beautiful chapters of gratitude. And then I've just repeated that process. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. So we're on to book 5, and hopefully book 6 and 7 will follow.
Well, good luck with that. I hope somebody listening is able to raise their hand and make a connection with you and maybe contribute to your books. How could they get a hold of you through, is it Outlier? Is it something new? LinkedIn? What do you recommend?
LinkedIn is definitely the social media platform that I'm most active on. So if people reach out with a personalized message and want to connect, I'm more than happy to. If you want more information or want to connect with me through the Outlier Project, it's the outlierproject.co. And we love our new members. We're growing like crazy. And it's just a very, very fun organization. But definitely, I would say LinkedIn. If people want to get a hold of me and have a conversation, that's the best bet.
Scott, you are a bevy of information. It was hard for me to select just one or two things to talk to you about. I hope that everybody has an opportunity to. And if it's not Scott McGregor or the Outlier Project or reading his books, that maybe you get the inspiration to create your own human capital circle. So that's such an old word. My gosh, that comes from the 70s, 80s. Your people network, your circle of trust, your tribe. One of the things, Scott, we're going to end the segment with something we talked about. I'm learning this from the people I'm interviewing. The largest hesitation for people leaving the military is coming into the civilian world without their posse, without their squad. You know, somebody said on LinkedIn the other day, and I got to get a hold of this woman. She said, if I'm skating across a frozen lake and I fall in, I know my team will get me out.
Yep.
I don't know that in the civilian world. Is creating something like Outlier or your circles of trust or your posse or your human capital, is that why you do it?
The Outlier Project is just a beautiful place for people to support each other. That's what it's all about. We're all trying to live our version of an extraordinary life. Everybody's version is a little bit different of what that means to them. But I think when you know that you have 700 people, and I'm sure it'll be 1,000 soon, that are all there to help lift you up and help you get where you want to go, that's a very comforting feeling. And I think especially people, and it's probably one of the reasons we have a tremendous amount of members with military backgrounds. And I think it's because they do lose that to an extent. We also have a lot of former pro athletes and Olympians. And I think you lose that when you leave pro sports or when you leave the military, where you've kind of got those really strong bonds and ties. So people are able to replicate that a little bit through the Outlier Project. And it's really a group that supports people professionally and personally in any way that we possibly can.
Again, this recording is timeless, but I just met Scott a few weeks ago. Like I said, immediately wanted to get him on the show. I look forward to learning more about you as my year and my membership progresses. This is not an ad for you to join the Outlier Project. This is a call to action for you, the listener, to create a network. And experts like Scott have been, and I've been in this world for many years, and we just kind of do it second nature. I'm a connector, Scott's a connector. And when I have really cool friends, I always want to connect them.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you like underwater basket weaving, 5 years from now, if I meet somebody that I will find you, that's who I am. So it sounds like this is something you're doing. And thank you so much for not only what you're doing as a civilian to support this community, but your time today. His name, I want you, many people are just listening to the podcast, even though it is on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. But if you could spell your last name, because it's not just MC, it's MAC.
I'm
right?
the Scottish version, so it's MACGREGOR, Scott McGregor.
Right on. Hey, Scott, you're awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to close this segment and just thank all of you. We'll be right back after a very short break. And we're back. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are at our next segment where we feature somebody who has been out in the workforce between 1 and 4, but not quite 5 years. My very special guest is someone I found on LinkedIn. He was talking about his transition story and his own business. Welcome, Michael Klemmer of Ariel Resupply Coffee. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on this.
It's an honor. Thank you so much. We were talking before we hit the record button on what we wanted to talk about. And your story, I think, is very important, your transition story. Why don't you go ahead and launch?
Yeah. So, I retired at 20 years. And I think, like most people, as the end comes, you kind of hold on a little bit. You're not quite sure what you want to do. There's this fear of the unknown, so to speak. And so I was a Army major. I'd done my 20 years and it was logistics guy. And I had just taken on two key developmental jobs. One as the battalion XO and then as a brigade S3. And so I was really heavily into the knife fight of military operations. And it was very hard to pull myself out of that and say, you know what, it's time to retire. And so that became a real challenge for me to be able to just even identify that that's what I wanted to do. So I didn't actually drop my retirement paperwork until 6 months before my retirement date and had it approved. And then when COVID hit, it kind of delayed my retirement just a little bit. I was able to push it to the right and extend it 6 months. But for the most part, I went right from the Army onto the street with pretty much just my hat in my hand and saying, "Well, this is what I want to do." That's the I would say
Short version?
the short version. Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. That's what I did. But as I retired, I was able to kind of fight my way into a skill bridge position with a company in the renewable energy sector, and then after I did that, I was able to kind of fight my way into an actual career that allowed me to kind of bridge that gap between what military was and what civilian employment was.
Let's dig deeper into that. I'm going to
Yeah.
cut you off. I apologize. What is that? You talked about that. You glanced over it. So that transition from what military was to what civilian is. Dig into that for me.
When I decided I was going to get out of the military, I had just learned about the program called Skill Bridge. I had just learned about all of these different programs that existed because when you're in the military, you don't care about it. You're focused on your career. When it's time to get out, all of a sudden, all these resources become available. And so I applied for every single resource that I could find, whether I thought it was going to be good for me or not. I just wanted to experience it. And when I applied for the SkillBridge program, when I left Fort Greggs Adams, formerly Fort Lee, it was a lot of industries in and around the Richmond, Virginia area, but I was moving to Charlottesville. And there wasn't any programs in Charlottesville that existed. So what I did in order to find a way into a SkillBridge program was I started networking on LinkedIn and reaching out to former Army veterans or military vets who were in positions inside companies who I could at least talk to. And I ended up latching onto a renewable energy company where the COO was a former Army West Pointer here in Charlottesville. And when I had the conversation with him, he's like, "Yeah, come on board." And that really allowed me to get my foot into the door of a civilian company, and then learn the culture, learn kind of what corporate life is, decompress from the Army, and then kind of have, my time away from two major jobs of XO and S3 and kind of relearn who I am. And I did that program simultaneously with two other programs, one being the American Corporate Partners and one being the Commit Foundation, which are phenomenal programs on both sides of the house. But from the corporate side, the SkillBridge side, that was a kind of I would say the real program that I wanted to be in because it really reintroduced me to what it looks like to go to work from 8 to 5.
Did you have a civilian career before the military?
No. I went through college, dropped out of college, and then just kind of putted around with some, part-time jobs and some other things before I decided that I needed to do something with my life and have Uncle Sam give me the push I needed.
Well, you talk about knowing yourself, getting to know yourself. A former officer that I used to work with said, I think we need to give people a chance to like opening a bottle of fine wine. You need to air the bottle of fine wine out. They need to dekludge. They need to transition emotionally. What was your emotional transition like, leaving 30 years and coming into a whole new situation?
Well, for me, I think it was something that I will say that even probably after 3 years, I still struggle with, although not as much as I did at the beginning. I think for for me, it's you go from being in a position by rank and by position where people are looking at you, expecting you to be or expecting to know certain things or be a specific cog in the wheel of whatever unit you're in or whatever, operation you're in. And then you go from that to the phone doesn't ring for you after 4 o'clock unless it's family. And nobody is calling you or caring about you the way that they did when they needed something from you at 8 o'clock at night in preparation for the next day. And so that was a very hard transition for me. But it was something that I found was the further I got away from it, the more I said to myself, wow, like this is what it's like not to have that pressure on me. So I
Right.
really gravitated towards it very quickly, I guess is the best way to say it.
So finding purpose and finding that you're useful, you did this through creating your own company, I'm assuming. Tell me about that.
I created Ariel Resupply Coffee specifically because of two things. Number one, I created it because when I was transitioning out and meeting new people, it was always over coffee. It was never over alcohol, it was always over coffee. So it's like, well, if coffee is this ubiquitous drink that everybody has in front of them and it builds relationships, then it's got to have something magical in it or magical about it. And for me, that was important. Because I always wanted to build relationships, especially as I network. The other thing is that I saw kind of this gap in the market where in the coffee world, especially in the veteran coffee world, there's not many companies that specifically talk about the logistics or the combat service support side of the military or the side of the military that works behind the scenes that nobody ever sees. It's always special operators, and nobody is going to make a movie about somebody driving 5,000 gallons of fuel down the road. They're only going to make movies about SEALs and Delta Force, and we know this, and it's fine. But I wanted to build something that spoke to my community, the community that I came from on the logistics side. And so that gave me purpose because I wanted to be a connector through coffee to many different people and kind of help rebuild what I think is somewhat of a clouded veteran community outside of the military.
Tell me about that cloud. What do you mean?
My experience with the local VFW, the American Legion, with some of the organizations that exist to kind of be places for veterans to go or veterans to be a part of post-service has not been, I would say, the greatest. And what I've learned is that their efforts to bring in people from the last 20 to 25 years is not as intensive as you would think it is. And because of that, the average age of some of those organizations trends on the older side where you're looking at Vietnam vets, Desert Storm vets, people who, even back into Korea, right? And they're great Americans. They've done great things. They're just not interested in what the OIF, OEF generation of veterans have to say or be a part of it. And they're not generating a youth movement. So I said, okay, well, if they're not going to do it, then I am. And I'm going to create something with ARC that can help bridge things that's a non-political, non-polarizing entity that can, be kind of the glue that veterans say, okay, here's a for-profit company with a nonprofit mindset of supporting other people and supporting the veteran, active duty, military spouse, first responder community in a way that speaks to us and doesn't create divisiveness. And that's really what I wanted to do.
How's that going?
Very well, actually. I think that there is a general outcry or a general sentiment that the culture in some ways can be very divisive, and having something that's focused on supporting others is a refreshing attitude for people, even in the coffee realm.
Tell me how coffee beans, a for-profit with a nonprofit mindset, how do you find your folks? Do they find you? Give me the details.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. the people who, I'm very active on social media. I'm very active on my own marketing because I'm doing everything by myself. Everything that you see or touch with Ariel Resupply Coffee is all me. And so, I'm very personable. I subscribe to this idea of building my brand in public. And so I talk about my wins, my losses, my failures, my successes. I'm not ashamed to say when something didn't work. And because of that, I've built a really strong community around what I'm doing. And I think that people gravitate towards that. People gravitate towards wanting to find, organizations or people like what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I partner myself with organizations that are about supporting people. So 22to0.org is an organization that's completely dedicated to healing veterans from anxiety and PTSD, as well as law enforcement. And their stated mission is to be out of business because they've healed everybody. And so that to me speaks volumes because they are about execution. They're not about performative 22 push-ups a day or just awareness or something like that. They're actually helping people. And so that's what I want to be a part of.
How's it going? Have you been surprised?
It's interesting. I've not really been surprised. I've felt that there are some other brands out there that have done a really super job. They just don't represent the community at large. They represent a very niche part of the community, and that's great. And you can't take away success from anyone. I just, for me personally, like I wanted to be represented by something different, and I don't want to be characterized a certain way by certain brands. And so because of that, like I just want to be, it's about, like, again, the word of support stands on itself, right? You don't need to do anything other than just know that, support through coffee, support through resources, support through community, support through caffeine, whatever it is, like that's what I'm doing, but it's all based on this pillar of support. And so it's whatever resources I can push and just, be good people and work with other good people. I mean, that's really kind of what I do.
I think you're doing a great job. If you chat, how do you get to the website? Tell us the website address.
Yeah, so it's arielresupplycoffee.com. And then you can find me on all of the socials. And I'm also on Amazon. So if you are on, if you have a Prime membership, you can buy all of my stuff through Prime. And then I'm soon to be local here to the 3 Krogers. So I will actually be in the retail here in the 3 Kroger stores here on a limited trial. And then if that goes well, it'll go probably across the state of Virginia.
Congratulations. Will I be able to buy you at Costco at some point?
Maybe. I mean, that's the dream, right? Like
It's the goal.
Distribution is king. So we will see where I end up.
Your logistics background obviously prepped you for the logistics side of this. What were you surprised about? What was the hardest learning curve in learning how to roast coffee, package coffee? What was it?
Honestly, the hardest part has been the marketing side of it. So I'm very good and, well, trying to be humble here. So I'm pretty good at the back end side of the business with establishing manufacturing lines, roasting coffee, understanding how supply chain works. That's my background. That's my bread and butter. What I've not been good at, and I'm getting better at, but when I started was how do you do the front end side of the business? How do you do sales? How do you do marketing? How do you do customer service? How do you reach people? And I've had to do a lot of growing pains in order to figure out how to do that. And I'm, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably still like a 4 or a 5, but that's a big step for me when I was a 1 when I first started.
You got to just start. I agree. I did this myself with this podcast. It's hard for me to watch the early episodes, even though they're my favorite people. I called all my friends, but some of the audio is weird and the videos glitch.
Right.
And it's like, oh,
Right.
I've learned so much, but if I hadn't started, I wouldn't be where I am now.
That's right.
So agreed. Where are you going to be in 5 years, friend?
Well, the goal is to be a direct competitor to some of the national players. And my idea and my vision is to take what I'm doing here and to create a third place for the community to go to that's more of an activity center than just a coffee bar. My goal is not to create another cafe or coffee shop on the corner. It's to create a place where people want to go, whether if you can kind of take an amalgamation of some of the veteran services out there with coffee, with a gym, with maybe a shooting range or activities where people want to come and be a part of it, and then overlay that with some of the help from like 22 to 0, where maybe I have people who are mental health professionals who just happen to be in the area that just strike up conversations with people and without, just help people and be, to try to, just connect. I mean, really, I think that's really kind of the end result.
You said coffee builds relationships. Did you come up with that through learning it, or had you had this in your vision and that's how you created this?
I think that's been in my vision. I think it's been something that I've seen over time before I ever started the coffee game and then before I ever started this business, because I wanted, even with my wife, like I met my wife, it was over coffee, and then every morning it's now over coffee. Every morning or every time I meet with somebody new, it's over coffee. I'm not a big drinker in terms of the alcohol side. So, it's aroma and smell takes you to certain places. And coffee is one of those very aromatic beverages that can take you back to a specific memory and a specific place with specific people. And I like that a lot.
I'm very proud of you, and I'm thrilled to learn about this through this. Thank you so much. Just so you know, I stalked him on where was it? LinkedIn. I saw that you were responding. I saw a little bit about your story. I saw your timeline and saw that you would fit into the show. So I appreciate you being so gracious and sharing your transition story. If someone out there wanted to follow your lead and create their own thing, how far in advance do you, and again, I'll admit, I wrote a book on being prepared 3 years out.
Mm-hmm.
That's not everybody. But how far in advance would you say, if there's an active duty service member out there thinking, I want to do this really cool thing, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to build something, what would you recommend they do that maybe you could have done?
Well, you can do market research and you can start looking at the marketplace. But I will tell you that my flash to bang from the idea to inception of Ariel Resupply Coffee was 15 days. And I went from, hey, I think I'm going to start my own business to I had an active website and an active sales channel and everything in a little over 2 weeks. And I subscribe to the lean startup method, which is don't go out finding funding. Don't go do any of that. I mean, you can do anything with website and a dream. But what you need to be able to do is validate your idea for as little money as possible before you put any capital behind it. Because, if I lost $5,000, okay. But if I lost $500,000, people are going to get mad. And so, somebody's going to get mad, including myself. And so I would say, don't hesitate. If you're sitting on an idea, start it. You can learn anything. I learned everything off of YouTube. I learned how to do everything off of the internet. You can find somebody who's done it, replicate it, make it yours, and move forward, and it'll be fine. And you'll learn just through practice.
Have you had the opportunity to hire folks? Do you have a company?
I do have a full-time business and sales director, I guess. It's me and him is what it is now. And so, I have hired one. I am in the process of vetting a few others, more in the operations side as I expand. I've established, and that's because I've just recently established my own manufacturing center here in Charlottesville. So I've gone from pretty much a very small roaster to a production roaster, and my capacity has jumped fairly heavily where, if I were to max the capacity of my roaster, I'd be pushing about 100,000 pounds of coffee a year. So we'll see. We'll see. Hey, and if anybody's listening to this, you want to help me, I would appreciate that.
Remind us where you are.
Charlottesville, Virginia.
All right. I'm sure there's a few people nearby.
I'm sure.
It sounds like you're very busy, but I know that your intent, I always ask people's intent. You want to share your story, you want to give back, and it's very clear through your business that you're doing that. How might someone reach you if they had interest in not only Ariel Resupply Coffee, but just you as a mentor or somebody that could help them walk through this transition?
Sure. So the easiest way is LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. The second way would be my email, which is info@arielresupplycoffee.com. I am the one behind the scenes on all of that, so I answer all the emails. And then the third way is I'm actually a mentor with American Corporate Partners. So
Okay.
I work directly with other veterans who might want to be in either the entrepreneurship space or supply chain management, because I did both.
I like it. Thank you. This is such a wonderful way. It's Monday for us. And whenever you're listening to it, it's your day. But this was the best way for me to start my day. Your story is outstanding. And not a big coffee drinker. I'll drink it on occasion, but living in the land of Hawaii and Kona coffee, I'm going to order yours. So I'm going to try it out and have it for my special guests if they come for the holidays or whenever. So thank you for explaining what you do and for your past service, for your current support. And I say this for everyone. Any last alibis? What would you like to end the show with?
I think just very quickly, for people who are transitioning or getting ready to transition, you were somebody before you joined the military, and you have to do two things. You have to determine whether or not you still like that person. And if you do like that person, how do you get back to being that person without the uniform? And if you can do that, then you're, I would say, way ahead of the power curve for many other people who are doing the same thing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Michael. All right, I'm going to wrap up this segment. This is our 1 to 4 year segment. We're going to be launching into the next segment, which is somebody who's been out in the workforce for at least 5 years. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back. As we head into our last segment of the show, we always feature someone who has been out at least 5 years. Many of these folks have transitioned into exciting careers or have had multiple career stops and starts. Our guest today, after serving over 20 years in the U.S. military as a Marine, he continues his Marine mission by being a transition specialist and other things. I'd like you to welcome my friend and guest, Bruce Thompson. Hi, Bruce. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Cheryl. Thank you for having me on here. It's a pleasure to get a chance to talk and, explain what happens 5 years post-transition.
Right. I think you're in the 7-year mark. And even though these shows are kind of timeless, we're going to try and keep them timeless by not giving years. You're very active on LinkedIn, which is how I found you and started following you, and we started communicating. You shared before this show started that you had a really awful first year. Would you be willing to talk about that?
Yeah. Again, my transition came, and it was kind of a two transition right away. My injuries is what led me to retire from service. You get to a point where you physically are unable to continue meeting the minimum standards. And so that was a hit. So, I thought I had 6 more years to think about transition and what I wanted to do when I got out. Well, at the same time, I was a sports guy since earliest memories possible. So again, injuries caught up, and I was no longer the sports guy. I was no longer an active duty Marine. And it was, okay, Band-Aid has been ripped off. What are you going to do next?
Go to work.
And then it was, again, go to work. Well, what do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I tell so many people in the transition space, probably the 2 toughest questions for us to answer are, who are we outside of the uniform, and what do we want to do next? Yeah. And I talked to so many people, and when I talked about that one, the strongest and the confidence, and they're like, oh, I don't know. That's a tough question. You're like, right. We have to ask the tough questions to figure out where we want to be. And I didn't answer those questions for a while. And my focus was getting my health straight and, trying to be as healthy as I could. And the surgery stacked up on me. And so I was very fortunate that I was on LinkedIn as a very early believer. Um, I got my degrees while I was in service. I took advantage of tuition assistance. And, by having that out there, I had a recruiter reach out to me about 2 weeks before I was going to be officially retired. And, his military headhunter is like, I got this great role for you. I want you to apply for it. I hung up on him twice. Here he was basically saying, here's a 6-figure job opportunity for you. And both times I was like, email it to me. I'll look it over. If I'm interested, I'll call you. Click. And so he emailed it to me. I looked it over. It's like, hey, it looks like my fitness report, just like the things I was doing in service. And it's not that I wanted to keep doing that, but I was about to be unemployed for my first time in my adult life. So I called him up the next morning and said, fine, I'll take the interview. Nothing like, enthusiasm about getting a 6-figure job interview, right? I took the interview. I hit it off with the factory manager. 2 or 3 days later, I was at the on-site again, not understanding anything about how to transition right. It's a senior production supervisor role at an electronics manufacturer, and I show up in a suit and tie. I've got people in jeans and t-shirts, tennis shoes that are interviewing me. I was there from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I interviewed with the factory manager all the way to probably the janitorial staff. I joke and say I think they grabbed some people off the street and said, hey, just go talk to this guy. And but every 30 to 45 minutes, I talked to someone different. 2 days later, they called and gave me the job offer. I accepted it. And that following Monday, I was at work. So less than 2 weeks from the time I got contacted to the time I was at work to get a job. Let me tell you, that is not how it happens 99% of the time.
Negative. It does not. You're right.
It's a much lengthier process. So during that, period, each job I ever had in my life, but I had no passion or purpose for it. And my mental health was not where it should have been to be in charge of $1 million factory, 45 people on my shift. And again, it just wasn't things I wanted to be doing. So luckily, week 3, I got a phone call. I got hit off LinkedIn where a Marine veteran who was the HR manager for a contracting company said, hey, we're bidding on these 2 Navy contracts, staffing contracts, blue collar, white collar. We'd love you to be the project manager for them. I didn't think LinkedIn was a real thing at the time. I thought it was a scam. Made them jump through hoops to have this conversation. We talked on a Saturday morning for an hour. They flew me up for the job interview. Again, it went great. Offered me the job. It was even higher paying 6-figure job doing what I wanted to do, getting my HR degree in HR realm started. I worked it off and on for 9 months. And then Merry Christmas, we didn't win the contract, so it all went poof, with the contracting world.
Yep. And
when it went poof, I kind of got that, well, I don't need to work, so I'll just sit around the house and waste away. And I did that. I didn't talk to anybody. I wasn't on Facebook, LinkedIn, any of the social medias. It was me and my dog sitting on the couch, watching TV and taking naps all day. I did that for 2 months. When I say I didn't leave my house, I mean I did not leave my house. When I wasn't talking to people, just, the wife on very basic conversation levels. But I was wasting away. And luckily, me and my wife have known each other for 30 plus years, been married for over 20. We can have those real conversations where, she kind of gave me that kick in the butt and said, this isn't happening. You didn't serve all these years and do all these amazing things. to basically wither away and die within 5 years of retirement.
Yeah.
So get out the house and do something. Well, I am a Marine, so I follow those directions clearly. I went to a par 3 golf course because my body couldn't handle a regular full-length golf course. I'd show up. I had my earbuds in. Sometimes there was music. Sometimes there wasn't, because I didn't want people talking to me. So that was my leave me alone signal. And I would play a round of golf without talking to a single soul, and go home and take a shower and get back on the couch with my dog and watch TV and take naps. After a couple of weeks, she said, "Who are you golfing with?" I said, "No one," because that wasn't part of the requirements. You used to get out of the house and do something. At no point did you say get out of the house, do something, and engage with others. So I followed your letters of the law. And she said, "Okay, Marine, you need to go out and people." It's like, well, I don't like people. I was like, "I don't like people." She said, "Yes, you do." I said, "No." I said, "No, I don't." She said, "Yes, you do." I said, "Okay, well, maybe I do." I applied for 3 roles. All 3 were in the military transition space. One of my Marines worked there. And so that was the automatic referral. I'd already gone through some of these workshops with the hiring manager, with the boss. And so that, was one of those, quick conversations where, yeah, the job's yours. We're going to set you up for training. We just had to go through the process. Another one was to be a logistics manager, setting up the classrooms, workshops, facilitators for all the personal and professional development courses there on Camp Pendleton. And that was between me and one other gentleman. We both knew each other. We both knew who was the 2 guys that were making the hiring decision. So that was a coin flip on the interview day. And then I applied to be a TAP facilitator because I had a horrible experience. So maybe I can go teach people to not have that.
Go fix TAPs, please.
Just got off the couch, was getting back into it, was like, had that enthusiasm. Federal hiring freeze of 2017 hits and takes this first 2 jobs away. Talk about a gut punch when you just were getting back on your feet. A couple weeks later, into it, the TAP role gave me a call. We had a great conversation. Led to the second interview, which was a presentation interview. And I was like, "Brain, senior enlisted. You want me to give you a 10-minute class? I can give that on anything." So I gave the presentation interview. It went well. Next thing you know, I was teaching the TAP workshops for, all over Southern California, from Camp Pendleton to all through Miramar, MCRD San Diego, 32nd Street, Point Loma. I even traveled to 29 Palms for a workshop. Talk about, extra incentive to get me to go there. But I absolutely loved it. I found my passion. I found my purpose. And, not the greatest paying jobs or anything else, but it allowed me to assist my family, my peer group, my brothers and sisters in arms, their spouses, to avoid going through some of those nightmare, that I went through, to keep people from those low of lows. And, I was lucky enough that, financially, with being a retiree, 100%, permanent total disabled veteran, my wife was, nice job. We were kid-free, debt-free when I retired. We had those things done, which gave us the freedom. Most people do not have that level of freedom that they can take a year to figure out where they are, or to take a position where it's passion driven, not, money driven. So, it was, how can I help others? And next thing you know, I'm teaching the TAP class. I got a smile on my face. For those that have seen me, it was before the beard, before the long hair, in a suit and tie, which, I don't put on very often anymore. But I loved what I did. I got to be connected to the community. I got to tell them about the things I did right, which was a lot. I got to tell them about the things that I didn't do right, which were a lot. And I think hearing firsthand others' experiences, good, bad, and ugly, is what we need to set us up. So that's kind of how I made it out of that first year. And as I was hitting that 12, 13 month mark, I was happy. I was excited, and I saw a positive future, which wasn't something that I can say I had for that first year.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I like a lot of what you said, but I'm going to pull you back to, you're in a teaching role now. You're in an advocate now. And you said something about the things we don't know are who we are and what we want. Given your experience, how are you teaching people to figure out all these things? Who am I? What do I want? What's your process?
For me, it's having extremely tough conversations. It's making people be really honest with ourselves, which is something that most of us rarely do. We avoid the tough questions. We don't want to talk about our shortfalls, our shortcomings. And some people, you ask them what they want to do, and they can immediately come out there and tell you, I'm going to open my own business. I'm going to be financial advisor. I'm going to be X, Y, or Z. And I love it because you see their eyes light up. And you see the passion. And you're like, that person gets it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have others where you ask these questions and you see the gazed over deer in the headlight look with, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And you start asking, what do you enjoy doing? And some people love what they did in service. They love being the administrator. They love being the supply chain. They love being the truck driver. They love aircraft maintenance. And you're like, if you love it, keep doing it. But then there's some other people like me who, hey, just because I did it and I was good at it doesn't mean I want to continue it.
Right.
And that's where we have those conversations. Okay, if that's not what you want to continue, where do you see yourself? And sometimes it's one of those things you have a passion or a love for, and people can start listing those. And then we can really break those down to, what kind of non-military roles, industry, job, criteria there is for them. Some are like, well, I don't really know. Okay, well, let's flip the script then. What do you hate? What do you not want to do?
Right.
So we can at least
Excellent.
eliminate those. And so instead of going from a 180, if like everything's wide open, we can talk about, okay, you don't like these things. Well, maybe we can get you to 100 or a 90 or, an 80-degree level and at least make it, more streamlined. But it's going back through and doing it. And I'm a advocate for mentorship. Having as many conversations as you can with people that have been there, done it, have the actual experience, that are in the jobs, that are in the industries that you're thinking about going to. So I love American Corporate Partners. I love Vet-repreneur. And there's so many other aspects out there, but those are my two big ones that I personally spend a lot of time either on. Vet-repreneur, I'm a mentor on it. ACP, I work with the team all the time, and I tell people, start at Vet-repreneur. Once you figure out what it is you want to do, sign up for ACP so you can get that one-on-one year-long mentorship with someone who's there and can open the doors for you.
Oh, good idea.
So those are the ways that I kind of start.
Mm-hmm.
Is I encourage conversations. I encourage the getting the wheels moving and thinking. And of course, as we go through, some people, have that, well, I want to move home. And I have that conversation. Well, you left. Things changed while you left. Sometimes people say you can never go home again. Have you been there recently? Before you commit to it, you might want to go have a visit. Some people are like, well, I'm just going to find a job and go wherever the job takes me. I'm like, I know a lot of people that did that and found out that job wasn't there, or they got laid off. They got fired. The job disappeared. And now they're stuck in an area that they don't want to be in. And it's very expensive to move. So there's all these different things that people have to understand who they are. And one of the things that we all have to understand is the answer is different for every single one of us. As we talk about the transition programs, and people will tell you that the program's broken. Well, I think the program is misunderstood.
Okay.
But one of the problems we'll go with is the transition program is based on helping you find your next job. It's about finding employment. I think we have to be able to first go out and say, what is your definition of transition success? Is it finding a job? And some people tell you my transition success is finding a 6-figure job. Well, that's great. Some people tell you it's finding a passion and purpose to follow. Some will tell you it's being at X city or state or whatever. But that's what we have to define before we go back there and start saying, this is success. And so we can't put everybody in the same group and think that everybody has that same definition. Because if you start that, you're bound to fail more than half of the population. And so I think that's one of those things where there's so many transition resources, organizations, programs, advocates out there that can help those that definition of success is not just finding a job. Because I'll tell you, you can find a job, but when I say job, it's something that you're doing just to keep the bills paid, to keep the lights on, keep food on the table. When you find your career, and that's what I like to talk about, is I like to talk about meaningful careers. That's when someone, is getting up in the morning and going to do something that they enjoy doing. They see a future. They see, a path. And those are those things that people light up with. We want to talk about a job. We've all had jobs where we showed up just because it was what we had to do.
Yep.
We want to talk careers. And those are those timelines and those restraints of, I might have to take a job. But that doesn't mean I take a job and I stop. Hey, I have this job because it's what I had to do right now, but I'm still working towards my success, my goals, my desires, where I want to be. And I think that's the bigger picture that a lot of people don't quite grasp, don't understand, because again, we don't know what we don't know. We've never done it before. First time I wrote a resume, I was 42 years old. I'd never had to write one. I didn't know what one looked like. I can tell you the first time I had to write one and hand it over to a transition professional because I was at a workshop, I was professionally embarrassed to hand that piece of paper over. They kind of had to just give it to me and took it from me. And I was like, but they looked at it and then they looked back at me and said, this is why you're here. And it was like, oh, mindset changed like that, because it was I didn't get looked down upon for having a bad resume. It was we all had to have a starting point, and that's what they were trying to figure out was, where are you at? And then what do we need to do to get you where you need to be? And that transition program, which is a nonprofit out in Southern California, I still give them all the credit in the world. Without them, I don't know where I'd be, because they taught me what it meant to transition. And I love them so much that I helped them with events. I would show up. I was recruiting. I helped fill them a few of their workshops, and I still do when they talk about it. And this is almost 8 years later, and I'm still a huge supporter of them. But that's the impact that one organization and two just incredible ladies that ran it had on me in my transition. And I've heard other success stories. And of course, I've had people say, well, I went through it and it's not as amazing as you thought it was. It's like, we all have different experiences. And that's 100%. Why there's 45,000 organizations and resources out there. We have to find which ones work for us.
What's the future hold for you? Are you going to continue on in this space because it feels good? Or do you have big plans? Are you writing a book? Tell me what's next for you, because you're doing so much.
It's funny that you mentioned, are you writing a book? I've never considered myself someone who would, but I have been asked that question a lot. So it's in my head. I'm thinking about it, because I tell people all the time, I'm just a dude. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on different social media platforms, but the message is clear. It's, how can I help others to find their success? And whether that's talking about mental health, transition, employment, just being a better person. It's there. So I found myself in the nonprofit. I'm with my, I think, 6th or 7th different nonprofit now. I love to show up when they're just getting started, and every 2 years I still like to PCS. And hey, you got you started, got you to a great point. Now it's time for me to go and try to do it again with someone else. And I love what I do, so I think I'm going to be sticking around in the nonprofit, somewhere in the assisting the military, the veteran military family community. But as I tell everybody else, always be open for a conversation, because you never know where one might lead you. And someone might come across and say, Bruce, I want you to come do this. And then I might just say, why not? Let's try it. So the future is wide open, and I love what I do. I don't see myself stopping. But you never know when someone's going to come out with that dare to be great offer or opportunity. And I'm not above a challenge and taking on something new and different.
The word yes is a very powerful word if you're able to say it. And it will stretch you. It will push you, man.
Yes is wonderful, but we have to learn to say no. If you're a servant mentality and you believe in service to others, I have overcommitted myself many, many a time where I didn't focus on self-care. I didn't prioritize myself. And learning to say no is something that we have to do. And I was that person through all my time in the military and working of coaching, everything else. I want to get to the yes. It might be we're not ready for it right now, but let's keep working to figure out how we can get there. And I absolutely love to do it. It's that positive mentality of yes, we can. But as someone who's learning self-care and prioritizing himself a little bit more, still very little, one of my shortfalls, learning to say no and standing by what your priorities are. Because again, if you make everything a priority, nothing's a priority. So we definitely have to put that in perspective, especially as people talk about their transition. You can't do it all on the first day. You can't do it all in the first month. So put those realistic goals together, develop your plan on how to get there, and then execute that plan. And as you reach certain levels, then we can go out there and add to it. Oh, that thing we said we couldn't do yet. Well, now maybe we can. And so you keep those things going on. And again, as we find some success, it grows to medium success, to big success, to we're unstoppable. So we can all get there. We just have to, put it into action.
Thank you so much. I've been wanting to talk to you for some time, and I'm thrilled that I have a platform where you can share a good chunk, 25 minutes worth of knowledge and advice. Thank you so much. A lot of folks are going to want to reach out to you. How might they reach to you? And I know you have a very common name, so give us the short, fast, and easy way to get a hold of you through LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, simple. It's Bruce Thompson, MBA, Mike Bravo Alpha. And most importantly, if you put that in there and you hit search, I'm probably going to be your first or your second one. Look for the guy with the beard.
There you go. I like the fact that you have so much facial hair. I know that's a challenge. And that's really the first thing that I see when I have friends that are departing the military, going into civilian careers. It's always, what can they do with their facial hair? So I have to say, yours is the most unique I've seen in a long time.
There's something about the freedom beards. And when you are built a brand and people recognize and understand it, why not have it? And again, I was military Marine Corps high reg with a clean shave and a suit and tie for my first probably year and a half. And then I started loosening myself up and just being more of who I was. And this is where it's at. Just, you got to be yourself.
Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing your journey. And I'm thrilled to be able to witness your growth. We're going to keep in touch. Definitely reach out to Bruce. And see if you can get some mentoring time with him if he's available. If not, just follow his posts on LinkedIn. It's always good information. I'm Cheryl Cross, and I'm your host. You've been listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour, and you are on Exchange Podcast Series, which will have many more series related to veterans, dependents, and service, just people that are serving in the military or have had some touch to the military. We have a lot of exciting things coming up. Episode 7, in the can. I am on a mission to bring you 100 voices of transition. And as of this episode, I brought you 21. I'm so excited. Thank you to Brittney Reeves, who is certainly in the soup, but won't be for long. Our expert, Scott McGregor. He is the CEO and founder of the Outlier Project, but also an author who gives all of his proceeds back to nonprofits. Michael Klemmer, our 1+ year vet and CEO and founder of his own Ariel Resupply Coffee, and then legend in the military to civilian space, Mr. Bruce Thompson, also a vet and representing the 5+ years. This episode, as all of our episodes are, is packed with information. So thanks for hanging out and thanks for supporting. Hit the subscribe button, like the episode, and it will get out to more people. Hey, wherever you are in your transition, if you're thinking of it, going through it, or you need a reset, remember, you are strong, you are brave, you are skilled, and you are trained. All of these things are needed in the civilian workforce. I'm Cheryl Cross. Thanks so much for joining. I'll see you soon.
Post-production for this episode is done with care by oceantreecreative.com.